Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Dodge this.
Welcome back to the Holy Moment Podcast, blah, 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 blah. You know, we watch movies, we love them, we talk about them with you. That doesn't matter because this week, I'm angry. Jeffrey, can you tell me why I'm angry?
I think that you are angry, Nathaniel, because perhaps you like this movie more than you were expecting. And your expectations, you don't like them to be subverted.
I like this movie more than the people at the Oscars like this movie. That is why I'm angry. Folks, we watch Prisoners this week. We watched the amazing movie from the beautiful mind of Denis Villenueve. Incredible movie. And I cannot believe, I was flabbergasted. After we finished watching it, I was writing all my notes out. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to go look at all the Oscars and see how prestigious it was. Not a single nomination for acting. They got one nomination for cinematography, which makes sense. It was Roger Deakins, who was the cinematographer, the GOAT, the king. Love his podcast. But they didn't get a single nomination for Best Actor or Supporting Actor or Actress. And I was blown away by this.
And they didn't get any wins either.
No, yeah. It was the only nomination they got was for Best Cinematography, and they lost. And so I was like, okay, what godlike movie came out in 2013 that swept and took all of the wins? And you know what it was? It was Dallas Buyers Club, Matthew McConaughey. He took Best Actor, and Jared Leto took Best Supporting Actor in it. And I have not seen the movie, so I will refrain from being too judgmental, but we have to watch it for the podcast so I can know if it beat Jake Gyllenhaal's and Hugh Jackman's portrayal in Prisoners, because it was just, the acting in this movie was insane on a different level than almost anything I've ever seen. And again, I know the Oscars isn't the all great say on what good movies is. It's kind of actually just a scam at the end of the day, but still, the fact that it wasn't even nominated, that's some bull crap.
Yeah, I mean, this happens a lot where we watch a movie and we go, oh, this was an incredible movie. These performances were fantastic. The cinematography, top notch. Why didn't it win in this category? It should have won in this category. And then we're like, well, who won in that category? I don't know, right? We check. It's like, well, I haven't seen that movie. And then I think we can't speak on it as much anymore. So we will have to watch Dallas Buyers Club.
We got to do our homework so we can insult people better. And also, I love Matthew McConaughey, one of my favorite all-time actors, but I need to drag him across the mud and say he should not have won Best Actor. And then Jared Leto, what a I don't want to say basket case. I want to say what a surprise. He's like a basket of surprises. You never know what you're going to get, if you're going to get him in Dallas Buyers Club or if you're going to get like him in Suicide Squad.
Maybe he is a basket case, though. He is a very weird man. I think he had like a sex cult that he was leading.
I 100% believe that. I have only been to one real concert in my entire life. I'm just not that much. I want to say I'm not that much into concerts, to be the honest truth. And we're going to get to the movie in a second. I'm not that much into music. Like, I'm not a big music guy. I listen to like the same 8 songs and I live my life. But the point of the story is some friends invited my wife and I to this concert and it was free. So we went. And he was the lead guy. It was for his band, not Maroon 5, 5 Seconds of Summer. That was a big, like, what the heck moment when I found out he was the lead singer in that band. But it was weird. The way people talk about narcissists and people like being like sexually attracted to themselves, like in like you see that depicted in fiction. But I've never really ran into a human like that. And again, I don't know Jared Leto, but just watching him on stage, it felt like he was like, I am God. You're my little people like listening to me and praise me and worship me. And it was weird.
Wait, 5 Seconds of Summer. Jared Leto is the lead singer of that?
It's no. 5 Seconds for Mars. Something. I always get these all confused. There's 5 Seconds of Summer. There's Maroon 5. And then there's 30 Seconds for Mars. That's the name of his band.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking 5 Seconds of Summer. Didn't they write the Phineas and Ferb theme?
Oh, I didn't know that. Did they?
I think so. It was some pop punk band that wrote the song. That'd be crazy if Jared Leto wrote that song.
That would make me sad. We should watch the Phineas and Ferb movie on the podcast. But anyways, all rants aside, Jared Leto, Matthew McConaughey, whatever. The point of the story is, guys, we watched Prisoners this past week. It was amazing. It surpassed my expectations, and I'm super excited to talk about it. But before that, let's give a little bit of background, as we normally do. Fun fact, everyone, this movie came out on my birthday. First time I've ever watched a movie that came out on my birthday. Technically, it was its release in like in the film festival ring when it came out on my birthday. It didn't come to like theaters until like September, October, but I'm counting it. August 30th, 2013. Director, Denis Villeneuve. I spent literally 20 minutes watching a YouTube video trying to figure out how to pronounce this dumb Frenchman's name, but I wanted to respect the dumb Frenchman because he's a phenomenal director. So Denis Villeneuve, even though it looks like Denis Villeneuve, studio is Warner Brothers. If you don't know who Denny is, he's done Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049. Most recently, he's done Dune Part 2, and next year, Dune Part 3, or maybe even this year. He also has written about half of the movies he's done. He did not write Prisoners, but all the Dune movies he wrote and a lot of other his famous movies that people really love, he also wrote. So he's a good writer. Budget, $46 million. Jeffrey, do you think this movie was a box office hit? Because we'll get into it later, but I think we both agree that this is a well-crafted movie. But just because you're a well-crafted movie does not mean you're going to be a popular hit. So on about a $50 million budget, do you think this movie did well at the box office?
It should have. And since you're posing this question, and we both very much like this movie, I'm going to guess that it did not do as well in the box office.
Oh, Jeffrey, the half glass empty man. No, it did 122 million. So
Well-deserved.
it did very well, which I also was surprised because well crafted. But again, this is a dark, gritty, upsetting movie, and definitely keeps you on the edge of your seat, but arguably not like an insane amount of action. Okay, a lot of action, but not a lot of action that people want to watch. Torture, yes, it's action, but not fun action. So just really happy to see that the film community out there and people just watch movies or go to the movie theater, watch this movie and gave it the time of day. Because I can imagine it being one of those movies that like not a cult following, but people really appreciate, but it just like flopped at the box office. I could imagine that. But again, I think it just goes to show what a great director Denis Villeneuve is to take this maybe not traditional movie theater material and make it absolute banger.
Makes me kind of wonder how well Seven did at the box office, which is a much darker film, but it's the same vein, film noir, neo-film noir.
It's true. I will say the two things that both those movies had going for them, and probably what made it as popular as it did, they both had star power. What was it? Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt in Seven, and then in this we have Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. So that was probably a huge drive for like what even got it in theaters to begin with.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that your favorite role in this movie, Hugh Jackman's character, is fascinating, and I think he plays him incredibly well. Is that who you're thinking of primarily when you're thinking he should have won Best Actor or
I'm torn. Like as soon as the movie ended, my mind immediately is Hugh Jackman and his portrayal of the main lead, Keller Dover, the father of the kidnapped child. That's immediately who I think of. I think he did an amazing job. But the more you watch Jake Gyllenhaal's character, the detective in like your classic film noir, the more you become really impressed. I say this not as an insult, but I do think maybe someone who's not really well versed in film would look past his portrayal of Detective Loki, especially because Hugh Jackman and the other parents of the kidnapped children, they're playing their roles great, but they're like over the top. They're screaming, they're yelling, they're angry, they're sad. Jake Gyllenhaal, which is a big topic I want to talk about, he was so discreet. His acting was so physical. It wasn't in his words. It was in his eyes. It was in his movement. It was in his teeth. And I think, again, as soon as the movie ended, I was like, oh yeah, Hugh Jackman, amazing. But for the past 2.5 days, I have been just going over this movie over and over again and talking with my wife about it. And the more I have, the more I've been like, wow, Jake Gyllenhaal pulled off an amazing performance. And so I think both of them should have deserved a nomination. I guess I enjoyed watching Hugh Jackman because, again, it's more expressive, but on a actual impressive level, there's a world in which I think Jake Gyllenhaal's performance was more impressive than Hugh Jackman's. But again, both 10 out of 10.
yeah, it is easy to be impressed by an explosive performance, right? Where the emotions are always high, and that was very much Keller Dover, right? He is in the worst circumstance that you could ever imagine someone being in, where their daughter has been kidnapped and is presumed dead. Of course, he's going to experience a lot of emotions, and we find that compelling as an audience. But seeing Jake Gyllenhaal, his character, maintain his composure, right? But there is passion bubbling underneath the surface. And when it comes out, it's all the more impressive, and it's expressed subtly.
The ability to express something subtly but also loudly is really impressive. Like his act, like you could tell how big his emotions were, but again, he like his character had to keep a restraint on it because that's his character, and just phenomenal. But we'll get all to that in just a minute. So talking about the actors, obviously Hugh Jackman plays our main character. Jake Gyllenhaal plays the detective, the other main character. we get a return of our classic favorite whipping boy, Paul Dano. Poor Paul Dano, always being beaten to death in every movie we watched. Now, granted, he's only been in one movie that we have watched, in There Will Be Blood, where he gets his head caved in with a bowling ball, thanks to, don't tell me, I want to say Louis Capaldi, which is horrifically incorrect. Okay, by Daniel Day-Lewis, also another favorite time actor. But in this movie, he plays what we don't know until the end of the movie, a kidnapped child. He basically is the red herring. He is the person we believe is the creepy pedophile that kidnapped a child, and he gets tortured for most of the movie. Other standout performances, Melissa Leo, who played Holly Jones, Hugh Jackman's wife. We have Maria Bello, who played Grace Dover. And then we have Viola Davis, who played Nancy Birch, one of the other parents of the kidnapped children. So before we jump into this, let me give a quick synopsis of the movie if you haven't seen it. Also, don't always do this because this is a movie podcast. Duh, we're talking about spoilers. But this is a great movie. Just 10 out of 10. Great twists and turns all along the way. If you haven't seen this movie, do yourself a service and go watch it. I think some movies we've reviewed, like, sure, just listen to us. Maybe you don't have to watch the movie, whatever. But I put my foot down here with Prisoners. Go watch it before you listen to us. That being said, here's the synopsis. Prisoners is a tense, gripping thriller about the disappearance of two young girls in quiet Pennsylvania town. When the police investigation stalls, one father, desperate and pushed to the edge, takes matters into his own hands. As the search unfolds, the line between right and wrong blurs, and the town's darkest secrets begin to surface. With haunting performances and a story that keeps you guessing till the very end, Prisoners explores how far a parent will go to protect their child, and what happens when justice and vengeance collide. My first question for you is, Jeffrey, we both kind of didn't know a lot going in, but I kind of built it up for being like, man, this is going to be a hard movie to watch. It's going to be upsetting. It's going to be disturbing. I don't really know why. I know there's like child abduction, but we both didn't really know anything going into this. Just simply, was this movie a harder watch or an easier watch than you were anticipating?
This movie was an easier watch than I was anticipating. I think I was expecting something more along the lines of Seven, where we end on a note that is without hope, that is completely cynical, right? But this movie, there is a glimmer of hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And of course, everything that's happened cannot be ignored, right? And this will have an impact on these characters moving forward. But at the end of the day, justice prevails.
I was in the exact same boat. I knew it was kind of child abductee, but I thought it was, and this movie's dark, but I like where it decides to focus its lens on the darkness of humanity. It really gets into this idea of like violence is a cycle. It just begets more violence. But what I think this movie could have easily have done for greater shock value, and I'm not saying necessarily would have been worse, but I think the direction they went in was better. I think it's easy to decide when you do child abductee to tread the line with sexual assault. And I think that would have made it very upsetting and a lot harder to watch and enjoy. This wasn't a movie where it was like justice and the good guys prevailed and we got the kids and the bad guys died. And technically that did happen, but it wasn't a feel good ending necessarily. But it also wasn't this, as you said, Jeffrey, a disturbing, upsetting ending where the father finds these children and horrible things happen to them and they've been killed. Like, I feel like, sure, that could have been a statement and that could have been a different story, but it gave us just enough darkness and a unique lens, but also a somewhat satisfying, hopeful ending that gave like, like it created good full circle for everything. You know, you don't feel like, oh man, they wimped out at the end. Man, I wish they killed the kids. But it also doesn't feel like, whoa, that was way too dark. And now I'm not going to sleep for a week. But that said, I'm actually going to jump all the way to the end of the movie. I think it was satisfying. Do you? So ultimately, folks, if you haven't seen it, the two daughters that get kidnapped, they both make it home. They're both unassaulted and alive for the most part. And our main character is injured and presumably buried alive and might die. But the very last thing we see is him kind of calling out for help with a whistle. So presumably he gets saved. Did you find it? Maybe you wanted a little more Seven? Did you want a little more Seven, Jeffrey? Did you want a kid's head in a box?
No, I can't say I wanted Seven. Seven's a great movie on a technical level. It was not a great experience. Maybe, you know what I mean? Right? Every now and then, I have to be in a very particular mood in order to want Seven, you know?
What is that mood? What mood puts you in? I want to watch the most despicable humans and also a man make a sword dildo and kill a prostitute. What kind of mood puts you there?
I don't know. Maybe I'm just feeling a little frisky.
Oh no, for all the ladies listening out there, if you've ever thought Jeffrey was attractive, it's your time to run.
No, I swear, Saoirse Ronan, please disregard what he said.
Little do you know, Saoirse Ronan is over there like, oh yeah, that's my thing too.
For,
Yeah.
for context, I have a massive crush, guys. Don't tell her. Or do if she's interested. Anyhow, okay. The mood that I have to be in to watch Seven, right? I want something that is well done technically. I want to appreciate it on a technical level. And I want to feel challenged, not only mentally, but emotionally, right? You have those days when you want to be emotionally drained by a good work of art. Maybe Seven's for one of those days.
I definitely agree with you. And I feel like this movie is the perfect balanced meal. You know how like the government came out with like a new food pyramid? This movie feels like the perfect food pyramid. It has enough fats, it has its protein, it has its vegetables, it has everything you need. I felt exhausted and literally been chewing on it for days, and I found new tidbits every single time I have a conversation about it, but I was not left disgusted and revolted and not wanting to like continue living. So that's why I kind of feel like I would put this over Seven just personally. Um, like this kind of falls in the category of Gone Girl for me. You know, kind of an upsetting, darker movie, but ultimately, I think there's a lot to chew on. Granted, I think that movie has a less happy ending, but that's besides the point. I'm with you. I liked that it ended quote unquote happily ish, but it wasn't just like it didn't end with like, oh, the mother and daughter and the father hugging and all is kumbaya. No, Keller Dover's going to jail.
Yeah. One of the things that we have to reckon with is one of our main characters that we should be rooting for, right? One of our protagonists has spent the entire movie brutalizing an innocent man with disabilities.
Just like the entire movie. He was just
The
like, how can I
entire
torture Paul Dano? Oh, but yeah, we'll get into that. Before we start discussing some specific things about what we loved about the movie, guys, we have genres. We watch these movies because we spin a little wheel and it tells us what category it falls in. So this season of the Holy Mo Podcast, one of our categories picked by my lovely co-host Jeffrey, film noir. So I wanted to pick something different. I was thinking about going with a classic film noir movie. Almost went with Double Indemnity. Glad happy I didn't because that's Jeffrey's film noir movie. But I ended up going with something a little more modern. Jeffrey, you put me on the spot last week and asked me if I remember what was it, French modernism in film was?
It is the French New Wave.
French New Wave. See, I can't even remember. Bad cinema major. So I'm going to ask you this. Do you remember like what the definition in your own terms of film noir is?
In my own terms, film noir is characterized by typically cynical perception of human nature, right? Moody lighting. Early film noir had a lot of German expressionist influences. And it typically, or at least stereotypically, involves a private eye archetype, a femme fatale archetype, cop. It arose out of the hard-boiled crime genre. But as a matter of fact, most movies considered film noir have neither the femme fatale or the private eye as major players. So it's actually a debate. I was doing some research as to whether or not film noir is a genre or a style of filmmaking.
Well, either Jeffrey was a much better student than I was, or Jeffrey read the exact same Wikipedia article as I did, as I brushed up on what film noir was. Because, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It is, the big things is, it is kind of a subgenre of the crime drama that became really popular during the Great Depression. Noir is literally French for black. So film black, so dark. Like you said, it's a very cynical look upon humanity. So everything you said hit the nail on the head. So I have to ask you this. Is Prisoners a film noir movie?
I would say so. It has the same hard-boiled crime genre roots that film noir has. It plays into it. Its view of human nature is cynical. Even though justice prevails at the end, we have to reckon with the fact that perhaps an otherwise quote-unquote good man has done something terrible. And there were various points at which he could have stopped, and he didn't. And that was an active choice.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, especially, I think a big thing for me with film noir is because I would like that is interesting. Is it a style? Is it a genre? For me, it does almost feel more heavily stylistic. And I do feel, again, even though it's not in black and white, even though it is more modern, set in a more modern area, it does still feel very film noir in its cinematography, in its blocking, in its editing. That's something I wanted to talk about. The editing and the cinematography of this movie was able to accomplish similar things that the Grand Budapest Hotel did, which is the movie we reviewed 2 weeks ago, but in such different ways. Again, we talked about the Grand Budapest Hotel. The editing was very quick. It was always momentum. It was always moving us towards something else in a very intentional way. It wasn't just push, quick, quick, next action scene, next action scene. It felt deliberate, intentional. It was a movement that was pushing us forward, not kind of dragging us. With this movie, very little cutting, very little coverage. Often scenes were one takes, or this wide shot and then maybe a little bit of coverage. But it felt very intentional. It didn't feel like, okay, quick, get the wide. Okay, go for a medium shot on her face, a medium shot on his face. Okay, get out. It felt more intentional than that. But I do feel the style of film noir, heavy contrast, often these wider shots where characters are covered in shadow. And then you have like your key light really making this character really bright while the character staying closer to the frame is really dark. So I felt like it had all of the classical structure of the style and the cinematography. But my question was, I was very surprised when I found out the only nomination it was for cinematography. Because to be frank with you, when the movie ended, I was not ripping and raving about the cinematography. And actually, I didn't even know. I don't want to be a big fanboy and kind of a fake fanboy, but I didn't know Roger Deakins did it. As soon as I found out he was the cinematographer, makes total sense. Like the style of his cinematography, just it reeks of that. So in hindsight, I had a greater appreciation for the cinematography. But in the moment when you were watching the movie, did you notice the cinematography or the editing, or did that kind of take a backseat in this movie?
I would say the one instance of cinematography that really stood out to me was at the very end when they're searching the house of not Holly, Alex's
I
adopted
think it is
mother.
Holly. I think her
Is
character's name is Holly. Yeah, yeah, Holly Jones.
Holly Jones. Yes, because Alex Jones,
She doesn't seem like a Holly, because Holly seems like a young person, in my opinion, not an old lady.
she's a beautiful old lady. Took me a moment for me to figure out if I wanted to say that or not, but she aged very well. Femme fatale. That's the femme fatale.
Oh no, it's
She's
wrong on so many
unassuming at the
levels.
beginning. No, it's she enters the picture and she is the kindly grandmother, adoptive parent of Alex Jones, and she's working with the police. She's collaborative or cooperative is what I meant to say. And at the end, we find out that she is in fact the killer, right? And she's kind of hot.
No.
No, no, no,
We
no, no,
cancel the podcast. I need a new co-host. This is not.
no.
Well, there's times to make jokes. That's when we watch Dougal. This is Prisoners. We're serious. Gosh darn it! Run, Saoirse Ronan, run.
Listen, listen. She was a very pretty lady, and I would not seek that. I would not. I swear. But when she was younger and in the prime of her youth, she must have been um, absolutely amazing, and she's still a stunner. She carries it well.
She also has like hardcore hippie vibes, so I feel like she would smell like dank kush and be dirty.
No, they were 100% hippies.
Hippies raging against God.
And that's what a lot of hippies were doing back then. So it tracks personality wise.
Yeah, yeah. Some like pushed against social norms by having unprotected sex and smoking weed. They kidnapped and brutally murdered children. Like what's the difference?
Like a good bit of setup and payoff is when they're interviewing or interrogating the priest and they say, okay, the priest has information for us. And the two bits of information are one, that they're waging a war against God, and the other is that they were planning on doing it again. I forget what the other bit of information was. But at that line of they were waging a war against God, the interrogators sort of laughed at him. It's like, oh, this is just religious talk irrelevant to the case because he's a priest. And I even thought that. I thought, well, that's kind of a cliched line. Priests are people, they don't talk like that. But as it turns out, he was actually just quoting a bunch of nutcases. So it makes perfect sense.
And it's that foreshadowing, but not just foreshadowing. It's that connection in small detail orientation of filmmaking that I think sets this movie absolutely apart. It's just every single line, every single bit of action, every single bit of set design is playing into the bigger picture, and it's just done so beautifully. And I'm trying to remember what like question was even what was my original question? Oh yeah, the editing and cinema. Oh yeah, so what scene particularly stuck out to you, cinematography wise?
Yeah, so they're exploring the premises, her home, after she has been dealt with, right? And the ground is frozen over, and he's walking in front of the car under which Keller Dover has been buried. And there's a moment where we're fully convinced that they're just going to leave, and Keller Dover is going to be lost forever. And then we start hearing that whistle, right? It's the dramatic irony of it, where if the audience sees that there's a bomb under the table and people are talking over the table without having any knowledge of the bomb, the audience is going to be on edge, right? That's going to speak to them and it's going to create suspense. And that's exactly what this scene was doing. We're putting Jake Gyllenhaal in this position where if only he knew, he could come to the rescue, but he doesn't know. And that weighs on the audience. And then all of a sudden we hear that whistle, right? And it plays a few times. And at first, Jake Gyllenhaal, he almost ignores it. And that increases the suspense. But then it keeps on playing. But that shot, that particular shot of him in front of the car where we know Keller Dover is under, that was impressive storytelling to me through the use of the camera.
Yeah, it was a great. It was also the final shot of the movie. Yeah, really well done. Especially, I could be wrong about this, but again, like I said earlier, this movie does consist of a lot of wider shots, not like immensely wide shots, but you're usually further away from people, especially for like Detective Loki. It was nice that that last shot really held on to Detective Loki's face and really got in there. Again, like we talked about earlier, Hugh Jackman, who played Kelly Dover, is a much more outwardly expressive person. Obviously, his child kidnapped, but he's always yelling, he's always screaming. We know he is literally telling us what's on his mind 24/7. But Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal's character, much more reclusive inside. So it's even through the cinematography where again, I feel like we don't always get his face. So it's really nice that they decided to push in and hold on his face for this final bit of the movie. And I think he did good in that performance as well. Of his, I'm just hearing things. There's not actually a whistle being blown, and then slowly but surely it sets in.
Here's one thing I'll say. As someone that enjoys acting and has acted in a lot of student films and short films, something that frustrates me as an actor is when I want to give a subtle performance, when I want to give a performance that is expressive through the face, through the eyes. And we see the movie once it's released and it's all very wide and we get no access into the actor's inner state, the character's inner state. I feel like there's a way to make a performance go to waste. And the easiest way for someone to screw up an actor's performance is to not showcase it.
I mean, it's the power of the close up. I feel like in film school, at my later years, junior and senior year, I started having an aversion of close ups. I started to view them as too easy. They're simple. There's not enough information. You can't fight them visually striking with composition and blocking. And I think that's just foolish. I think something I love about film is there's no right or wrong. Wide shots versus close-ups, heavy contrast versus, not like a shallow depth of field or deep depth of field. This type of lighting versus that type of lighting. This type of acting versus that type of acting. I love that in film you can do it all. You can do it all badly or you can do it all well, but like there's no right or wrong with the types of things you do in film. And that's what makes film limitless with our storytelling.
And there's just power in a face. There is power in a face, whether it's a close up or a wide shot. If you are seeing the actor's face, then you are getting insight into the character's inner world.
And great storytelling. Again, you can achieve so much of this through the cinematography where you can literally hold us back from that inner world and you could do it purposely. Like I do agree there's some times where like we as the audience need that inner world. We need that close up when we don't get it. I think that's bad. But sometimes the director's purposely being like, you don't get to know what's going on with this character. You don't get to know what's going on with them. And then finally, boom, halfway through the movie or the end of the movie, like boom, here's their face. Here's the payoff that you so desperately wanted. And so it's so cool how it's multiple layers that are building up a performance. It's not just the performance, which leads me to a question I have, a genuine question as an actor, Jeffrey, and your personal experience with it, and maybe what you've heard from other actors. I don't quite know how to phrase this, but like, what percentage or level of a good performance, or just a performance in general, is the actor versus the director? Because at the end of the day, the actor is the one who is doing it. They are acting on screen, but the director is arguably the one that has given them the direction to do it. So obviously they play together, but in your opinion, when you see a great performance, is your first mind going to what an amazing actor or wow, what great direction?
Well, here's what I'll say. The job of the actor is to be at the service of the director. So, if you have put a ton of thought into who this character is, and you've done a lot of research and you've practiced in front of the mirror, and you've imagined every step along this character's life so that you can reach the point, the headspace that you envision your character is at. And then that vision is not aligned with the director, then you're not in a good position. You're uh, not really doing your job. I saw this clip from an interview that Ryan Gosling was giving. He was initially cast to be the main character of a particular movie, and his vision of what that character was is very different from the vision of the director. And he imagined that his character was 200 pounds, like slightly overweight. And so he didn't do, like, he ate intentionally, and he was very purposeful in getting himself to a certain physique. And he arrives on set, and the director sees him. He says, "What are you doing? Why do you look like that?" And he's like, "Well, I just felt that the character would be in this kind of shape for this kind of job." He's like, "No, that's not what the character would be at all. That's not what we need at all." And he was eventually recast. That wasn't the only reason, but they realized that their visions of the character and their visions for the story were irreconcilably different. And at that point, it's easier to just step away and let the director do what he wants to do with the story.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you because I think me coming from more a director lens versus the actor lens, again, they work together. You can't have one. It's like one outshines the other. In a perfect world, and we talked about this in an earlier episode. I don't remember what it was, but I think in a perfect world, you have a director that you hear this all the time in interviews. Oh, I couldn't have gotten this performance without my director. But I think it's a two-way streak. I think the actors bring a lot to the page and they give suggestions and they do things that the director never would have dreamed of. And the director can take it, chew on it, and go, yeah, that's great, or no, that's not. And so I think they push a good director and actor combo will push each other in both directions and it will go upwards towards a better trajectory and better performances.
Communication is key. Communication is the most important thing between an actor and director. If there's no communication happening, you are going to end up with a bad movie.
I think Prisoners is the perfect example because I could imagine being Hugh Jackman or Jake Gyllenhaal and being like, "Whoa, this other person is performing so differently than me." Like, when Hugh Jackman goes to the Detective Loki, and screams at him, "You're not doing enough. You're not doing enough." I can imagine Jake Gyllenhaal's character being like an angry, pissed off old dude, or just like an angry guy, and like starts yelling at him the same. "Oh, I'm trying to save your daughter," and they're the same note but they're completely different notes. Jake Gyllenhaal's parents are so reserved. And so I feel like the fact that the director was, and this is what makes me just mind melts as a good director, especially when you didn't write it. In my opinion, it's easier when you wrote the script so you know exactly how you wanted it originally. But for Denis Villeneuve, the performance that he was able to get on a consistent level, the fact that he was able to see through the whole script, not just in a moment, but he could see every single character throughout the entire script and how they evolve in such subtle ways. Again, I think really shows a great director and great actors.
For sure. I something I really appreciated about Jake Gyllenhaal's performance. Again, as you said, he could have been very explosive to match Hugh Jackman's energy, but you got the sense that whenever he was interacting with Keller Dover, he was just exhausted. He was just irritated. He's like, "Let me do my job," right? It wasn't as much, "I'm the professional. You should uh, follow my advice and stay put." It's like, "Let me do my job." And that was a cool acting choice.
And what I loved about him was again, yeah, he could have been angry with the father, but I love like he took his pride out of it. Detective Lockley wanted to save these daughters. That is what he was there to do. Even though he was reserved and quiet, he wasn't it wasn't a prideful thing. He desperately wanted to save these children. And you could see the anger in him when he, like two-thirds in the movie, when he felt like he was failing, when he was sure they were dead. And so I love that it wasn't this masculine, they're throwing their weight and their dick sizes around, but it was genuinely just two different perspectives of, I desperately want to save this girl and I desperately want to save my daughter. And their egos, they weren't fighting because of their egos. And I like that. They're fighting out of this desperation to save this girl, but they had different ways of doing it.
For sure. And the thing is, whenever Jake Gyllenhaal expresses that irritation, that frustration, that exhaustion, it's not aimed at Keller. It's aimed at the situation. It's aimed at, I want this as much as you do, and you being the way you are and behaving the way you are and treating me the way that you have been is obstructing that goal.
Well, I was actually saving this for a little bit later in the podcast because I felt like acting was the most obvious thing to discuss and something I really wanted to get into, but we've really kind of gone through a lot of it. So let me just ask you this really quick. Who had the best performance, but what specific moment of acting was your favorite?
Ooh, who had the best performance? And which moment spoke to me the most? Hugh Jackman has a lot of the explosive moments, the very emotional moments, understandably so. This father is experiencing something unimaginable. As you said, Jake Gyllenhaal, he is playing with subtlety, with finesse. His character is disciplined, and we see that, and those cracks in the discipline are effective. Paul Dano, I want to talk about him for a second because Paul Dano has a way of being unsettling, but also giving off like innocence at the same time, right?
Yep, I exactly know what you mean. Like when that scene where they first pull him from the RV, like early in the movie, when they're like, "Yeah, we got this creepy dude." He played at any moment's notice. He could play a gross pedophile. He could also play a kid with disability who doesn't know what's going on, and he's like interchangeable, which made him so perfect for the role.
But I felt so awful for him, especially when we see him a bloody pulp, right? His face is so swollen and he looks childish. He looks baby like. He looks painterly, almost as if those old Renaissance paintings of the saints and Saint Sebastian mm, littered with arrows. That's what he gave to me. The depictions of Christ after he's been flogged and crowned with the crown of thorns. He was an innocent lamb, but just as well as he's able to give that performance, he gives just an unsettling, yes, I am guilty in the same breath. He's the perfect character for a red herring.
Yes, yeah, that is something I loved about this movie. Just like the three different red herrings that we get, and the great use of them. But that begs the question: is that your favorite? Was Paul Dano your favorite performance?
I think it's hard to compare Hugh Jackman's performance with Jake Gyllenhaal's because they were so different and they were trying to accomplish different things with their performance. They're on kind of an equal playing field in my mind. And that's where I'll land with that.
Gotta play it safe. You don't want to piss off Jake Gyllenhaal or Hugh Jackman.
So much of their performance was the chemistry between them. It's like Paul Dano and Daniel Day-Lewis and There Will Be Blood. Can't really have one without the other. They bounced off of each other so well, and that's because they were both what they needed to be individually.
I wonder if Tarantino thinks Paul Dano is weak shit in this movie as well.
I mean, to be fair, he spends the majority of the movie being brutalized and tortured by a man who is clearly like an alpha, which I think Tarantino would buy into that whole.
This is Tarantino's porn, just Paul Dano being beaten to death. That's horrible. Don't do that, Tarantino. Bad. Okay, and then what about? Because I think I often ask you your favorite performance, but let's dial it down to something smaller. As an actor, what's something that you saw that even if it was really small, something that really impressed you? I guess you did talk about. Well, no, you talked about the scene at the end with Jake Gyllenhaal's character from the cinematography. I talked about it from the acting standpoint. So yeah, what's just a moment for as an actor that you were really impressed by?
Jake Gyllenhaal, when he is dealing with the second or third red herring, the man that has been running away from him, starting at the vigil, the one that's been sneaking into people's houses and stealing their kids' clothing. He shows up at his house and he starts asking questions. And his demeanor is very friendly. He's seeking to understand, seeking to empathize. Like, why did you run away from me, man? And the moment that that character indicates that he's about to run, right, that he doesn't want this anymore, that friendliness, just a complete 180. He tackles him to the ground, and we see that violence. We see that uh, desire for justice manifest in very like physical behavior, and that switch was very believable. But it spoke to a very compelling character who's able to speak to someone with charm, but also subdue them with violence and even with a twinge of hatred.
It was a great scene, and something that I liked about Jake Gyllenhaal's performance is he wasn't necessarily like a manipulator, but he almost did seem to have this ability, like an actor, to put. I guess you probably need that as a detective to put on a face to get something out of like someone you're interrogating, or to get what you need as a detective, the information. So Jake Gyllenhaal's ability to almost become an actor in his own role as this detective was really cool to watch. And yeah, that was a really cool scene. Well, moving away from acting for a little bit because that's just what we've been glazing this whole time. Um, let's talk about something that's really specific for a little bit. This movie, I think, has two really big themes in it. I love a movie that doesn't feel like it's preaching at me and political, but still says something. It's not just like, and then they saved the world and they all lived happily ever after. Like there's something to be said. I thought two of the most prevalent themes in this movie was very clearly the cycle of violence. Violence begotten on someone is they're just going to go on and commit the same violence, and it's going to go over and over and over again. The sins of my father are the sins of me. But then on the duality of that, you have people dealing with grief in very different ways. And my goodness, I know this is going to sound like the same thing, but I promise it's not. We've been talking about the acting. I want to talk a little bit about the characterization, the writing of these characters, and the level of nuance they were able to we were able to get out of them. And let me explain this for a minute. I've been talking about this movie nonstop with my wife, and she asked me an interesting question tonight. She's like, "Hey, out of a majority of the podcast movies you watch for the podcast, you've talked one of the most about this one. Why? What's different?" And I had to sit there and think. I was like, "Well, is this? Is it that? Is it this?" And I came to, in my opinion, the realization: the writing coupled with the directing, coupled with the acting, created the most realistic humans I've ever experienced and one of the most interesting setups I've ever experienced. Basically, everyone was dealing with an innate desire for violence, and everyone was dealing with a horrible overwhelming of grief as they're dealing with the loss of their daughters. And so every conversation felt so real as this violence and grief manifested. And that's what made it so interesting. There was always something to chew on. Every single conversation in this movie is a masterpiece. Every single conversation feels like a layer upon layer of real human psyche. When we talk with people, it's not always like, yes, I like this girl. I liked this meal. It was very good. We're not robots. We subtly imply things with our body language, with our tone, with our inflection, with our eyes. This movie just had layers upon it. And I loved going back and thinking about a scene and being like, "Oh, how they said it." It wasn't like a liar and manipulation like in some movies where it's a twist, but it was just like how they said it, why they said it, like what was their motivation there? And that's why I think this movie just is so compelling to me. So let's go back again. Cycle of violence, dealing with grief. Talk to me a little bit about, did you enjoy those two themes? Do you think they were portrayed well? Because again, some movies will preach at you. Violence is bad. Don't commit war. Look at all these people that died. Feel like shit. I don't love that. So how do you feel? Do you feel like this was preachy? Because it was very clearly on the tip of the tongue, like it wasn't hidden. Or did you like how they conveyed the violence of cycle and dealing with grief?
I think that they portrayed it very effectively. In fact, I did a lot of reflecting on Keller Dover's character in particular because he is so fascinating and well written. What are the things that we know about Keller Dover? One, we know that Keller Dover is a deeply religious man. The movie begins with him praying the Lord's Prayer. Two, we know him to be fiercely self reliant. What's one of the first things that he says to his son in the movie? You know, the most important thing your granddad ever taught me: be ready. How interesting is it then that the catalyst for this story is an event that he couldn't possibly have been prepared for? The kidnapping of his child and her presumed death. And what with him being religious, we see in him a tension of values. We have these religious values of forgiveness and reliance on God, on others, that are in competition with his desire for vengeance and his sense that he has to handle things on his own. Once his child is kidnapped, he's left with nothing that he can do officially, like legally. He has to put the case in the hands of the authorities, whom he perceives as being unequipped for the task. And this is his daughter. It infuriates him, the idea of other people handling his problems. And so what does he do? The first suspect, the primary suspect, the first person that people think obviously did it, He's the scapegoat now. I have control over this. I can go to him. He's been released. I can take him captive and I can get the answers out of him. And even as evidence comes out that makes Alex Jones the less likely suspect, he holds on to this idea of no, he knows something. Why? Because the moment he recognizes, the moment that he acknowledges that Alex Jones is innocent, is the moment that he relinquishes control. He no longer is the self reliant provider for his family that has the answers. He can't solve this problem himself anymore. He has to give it to the authorities. And so he doesn't want to relinquish that power.
I guess yeah, that's not something I ever thought about, that how Keller Dover is someone who needs to be in control. And you're right, when he loses control of the situation, he clamps on to anything he can get his hands on, even if it's very clearly not true. Like, as it became more and more likely that Alex Jones was not the kidnapper, he said it. He's like, "I know you know. I know you know where they are." And even though he was kind of vaguely inherently right, you could tell it wasn't really based on something he knew. It was more like, if I give up on this, I will have nothing. I have no one else to track down. I have nothing. I will have to go sit at home and just wait. And I cannot do that. I would rather torture a man who is more than likely innocent than go back home and do nothing. Which just says how much he has to be in control of things.
Yeah, because he prides himself on being able to handle any scenario, any circumstance that comes his way. If there is a natural disaster, they are prepared. If burglars come into his home, he has an answer to that. His daughter is kidnapped. What do we do? He just has to rely on other people for help? No. He's going to figure this out. This is my child, damn it. I'm going to save her. And we see these other people, they're bumbling, and they got the guy and they released the guy. I have to answer this. This is on me now.
Just that, like, guilt driving him. And I love that we get to see, I don't even want to say the cracks in his facade, because I don't think he was putting up a facade to really begin with. But I love as he continues to go on how his grief starts to come out. And he's like, there's a great scene where Detective Loki and Keller are in a police car together. And at this point, Detective Loki's kind of suspicious of Keller. He's like, "You're up to something." And Keller's trying to throw him off his scent. So he starts going on this, monologue of like, "Oh, I haven't drank in so long and I'm drinking. And I just don't want my wife to see that I'm drinking." And so he's lying to Detective Loki, which, as we, the audience, knows. But his lie begins to slip and he starts to tell the truth, his deep down truth, which he didn't mean to. He was multiply just trying to lie and throw Loki off the scent. But again, he's emotional. He hasn't slept in 5 days. And he something he says really pivotal. I think something that's really the crux of his character. And he's starting to cry. And he's like, "You need to go back out there. Don't be following me. I'm not doing anything. You go back out there. And I'm gonna keep looking for her. And you know why? She's not expecting for you to find her. She's expecting me to find her. It doesn't matter if you save her. She's expecting her father to save her." And I feel like that just says so much about him. And it's so, and that then the movie, that Detective Loki's the one that ultimately saves the daughter at the scene in the hospital. The mom wheels her in the wheelchair and it's like, "Here's your hero, Detective Loki, while your father's dying in a pit, shot." And so I just love that scene where he is breaking down, realizing like, I need control over this because I feel guilty, because I have to be the one to save her because I'm her father. It has to be me.
On the note of guilt, even as he continually makes the decision to keep on torturing Alex, even as all of this evidence has been presented to him that Alex is innocent, that there are other factors at play, other people that are involved, he chooses to ignore that. He chooses to feed into the anger, to feed into the violence, to feed into that lust for vengeance. And that is a guilt that bears on him. Because throughout the movie, he prays the Lord's Prayer several times. In that last moment, he's trying to pray it. Once he gets to the part of, "Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us," he's not able to finish it. Because he has just tortured a man. And he knows that he is going to continue torturing this man. But he's stubborn. He wants to answer this. He wants to have the answers. He wants to be the provider. And that is at conflict with the value of forgiveness and grace that he expresses when he prays that prayer.
And all of this anger and grief and guilt, it all comes to a head at the end of the movie where Keller finally realizes who the kidnapper is. Little old Miss Jones, Holly Jones, who would you suspect? And they have their confrontation. And she gains the upper hand, drugs him, takes his gun and or his hammer, and puts him in handcuffs. And she has this amazing line. Something that ran through my mind a lot during this movie was, in the lesser hands of the writer and a lesser hands of the director, lesser hands of the actor, this would have been a bad movie. And you could say that about every movie, obviously. But this movie specifically, there was just enough like things that could have been cheesy. Things that could have this movie could have been boring. This couldn't have landed. I just feel like this movie specifically, it could have been real rough. And I say that because Holly Jones, she has a gunpoint, he's nowhere to go, into the road. And she gives the reason why they're doing it. Even though it was already said at the beginning of the movie, but again, we didn't know that. It was a mystery at the time. And she says, "We're raging a war on God. What's the best way to do that? Bring demons into this world, spread chaos and depression and hopelessness." And that's exactly what we did. We turned you into a demon. Look at you. Because I think in the back of her head, she knows that he kidnapped her quote unquote nephew, who was actually just another kidnapped child. I think she probably has some suspicion what he is doing to her nephew. And she's like, we did exactly what we wanted. You have given up on your Christian ethics and morals. You have tortured a man. You're at the brink of being killed. You're about to never see your wife again. You've thrown it all away. We have successfully brought more violence into this world. And so the cycle of violence is so perpetual. I love it on the macro scale, where like this, like her saying we are kidnapping kids to put more violence into the world, but it goes all the way down to the micro level. We see the situation that the Dover family is in because of what she has done. Keller is freaking out, but then we have a great scene where he rips into his son. You know, again, he is exhausted. He's keeping from his family that he's torturing a man, not telling them. And he call like basically is like, "Hey, you're weak. You need to be strong for your mother. You need to keep lying to her. Don't let her know that our daughter's probably dead." And then the son screams back at him. So it's this idea of violence, and now the son is full of anger and rage. And so even on the micro level, violence begots violence begots violence. Was there any specific character? Because we're talking a lot about Keller, but like every character in this movie is experience violence onto themselves and then pushing it onto someone in some shape or form or fashion. I think it's hard pressed to find even one character that's not gone through this. So is there any examples in the characters, this cycle of violence that you found fascinating?
Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Detective Loki, becomes so affected by the violence and so affected by Keller's rebukes of him that they have a suspect in custody. And in a rare moment of explosive anger, he botches an interrogation. He lays hands on the uh, interviewee. And what results from that is the interviewee inflicting violence upon himself. And now he's lost a suspect. And now we're in an interesting position where um, we've talked about Dover, Keller Dover. He prides himself on being self sufficient. And so the whole movie is about him not being able to be self sufficient. We've got this character, the detective, who's never lost a case before. And this is the case that he might have lost due to his own reckless act of violence. And now the suspect has killed themselves. And we see that frustration in the aftermath of that, where he's like knocking things off of his desk. I feel like that's a notable example of violence begetting violence.
No, that's a great example that I didn't even think about. Like, again, it's the case that's driving him insane. The violence that's being enacted on all these other people, and then Keller kind of being a prick in some ways. Again, obviously, we understand why he is stressed, but he's not helping the situation. But it leads to the main suspect committing suicide. Yeah, that is a great example. It is literally every single action in this movie is propelled by someone's violence, filling someone else with rage to go commit more violence in some form or fashion, which I find genuinely fascinating. Okay, one of the last things I wanted to talk about in this film, and probably the biggest thing, but I'm trying to switch it up, not always talk about the most obvious first, is the writing slash directing. I've kind of been tiptoeing over it the whole episode, if not just blatantly saying it. But this was such a tight script. Again, every single small detail was a foreshadowing moment, or every single character decision was something that was so beautifully characterized and who they were that it made sense. Or if it didn't make sense, it's because we didn't have enough information yet. Everything connected back to something. No loose ends in this movie. And then the directing. Denny was able to take this amazing script and make it even tighter with so many small decisions. So I'll give an example, but I want, were there any really small moments of direction or writing that you're really impressed with? Again, this is like what I love about this movie is, don't get me wrong, I could not make this movie. I couldn't even write this movie. It's well beyond my skill at this time in my life. But arguably, not crazy sets. The cinematography, even though is absolutely laser precision perfect, it's still very doable. There's no crazy tracking cam. Like, besides maybe the car chase, or not chase, but like Jake Gyllenhaal taking the girl to the hospital at the end. Most of it's like on sticks. It's just static shots. So again, achievable is all I'm trying to say, but perfected. And so, was there anything in this movie that a lesser director or writer would have just glossed over? There wouldn't have been payoffs for it or setups for it at the later part of the movie. For me, I'm going to give a small example, and I kid you not, this might have been my favorite part of the movie. When this showed up, I literally jaw on the floor and I gasped, and my wife is like, "What?" Keller Dover torturing Paul Dano. Also, I love sometimes how when we talk about movies, we use character names, and then sometimes we use their actor names, and like we'll talk about a character and an actor in the same scene. Keller Dover being the character, Paul Dano being an actor, but sometimes people's names are just memorable. But the point of the story is, Keller Dover brings in his neighbors because his neighbor's daughter was also kidnapped. It was, I think, the Birches family and the Dover's family that their kids were kidnapped. So now the wife and the husband are in on the torture. They partook in it. And so we have this scene where the Birches, they just got finished done with a torturing session and they go home and they're exhausted. And the wife is in the kitchen. And guess what? Do you remember what's in the kitchen, Jeffrey?
The Thanksgiving setup, the
The
meal.
Thanksgiving meal. The daughters were kidnapped an hour or two after Thanksgiving dinner. Literally, the scene beforehand, they just verbatim said, "It's been 5 days since our daughters were kidnapped." That scene, that kitchen was still littered. It was bowls of half-eaten corn, dishes of yams, and the countertop. Your daughter's just been kidnapped. You're not going to have the freaking mental fortitude to clean a kitchen. But I feel like a lesser director never even would have realized. Never even would have thought of that. Oh, they're in the kitchen, put some dishes here, move on. But that tiny, tiny detail spoke leagues about our character's emotional state. And that type of small detail makes a master at work when it comes to a director. Absolutely beautiful. So are there any moments like that just weirdly stuck out to you?
There's that comment that the priest made about them waging a war against God, which I thought was cheesy and cliched until I realized, okay, that's not like him. He's literally quoting the nutcases. There's also the scene with the sock. I was fully convinced at that point that Anna and Joy had been killed by this individual. And I wasn't checking up on how far we were in the movie. I figured that we were close to the end, and now it would be a matter of bringing this man to justice. And then we find the sock later, right outside her window. And it makes a lot of sense. He has been breaking into homes. We've seen that. And that makes for a good red herring, too. When the Birch's teenage daughter is in the bath, she's talking to the Dover kid over the phone. And this man breaks into their home. That filled me with such fear, such terror, especially once the Birches had come home and they're knocking on that door. They're trying to get her to come out and she's not responding. What a way of creating suspense and then alleviating that suspense once she opens the door. And she's like, "Where have you been, guys? I wanted to give you a taste of your own medicine."
And then immediately recreating that suspense where it hard cuts to the Dover's house and you get that like boom, boom, and then you see the dark figure in the Dover's house. So yeah, creating that suspense, cutting that suspense, and then immediately bringing it back, but 2 times harder was amazing. I will agree with you. For a movie that had me on the edge of my seat for 90% of it, that scene was probably the most like thrilling. And I was like, they're dead. They're dead. He's going to come in and he's going to be trying to kill the daughter. And then the parents are going to come in and someone's going to get stabbed and fall down the stairs like in Psycho. I just was sure that was going to happen. But again, didn't happen because this was like a film noir, a slow boil, a long stew, and it was good. Something that also a really small detail that stuck out to me that I just loved. Again, it's like they didn't have to do this. They didn't have to. but they're just connecting all these little things. All these little threads are being sewn into a beautiful tapestry. Very early on in the movie, when Alex Jones is taken into custody, and Detective Loki pays his aunt a visit because they find in the record system, oh, he stays with his aunt. So we get an exterior shot of Detective Loki looking around, and he's looking at this old catalog, rusted, grass growing up around it, looks broken down, beaten, probably been here for years. And then Holly Jones, the sweet little Holly Jones, comes out and is like, "You want to buy it? It's my husband's old car. It was his favorite thing, but he's gone now." Well, guess what? We find out underneath that car is where the kids were hidden. They're hidden underneath the car, under like a concrete slab. And so again, it's just small things like that build the world we're in. Even though it's a very small world, we're in a small rural Pennsylvania town for 6 days. The world felt very lived in. And again, I think that is just those small details make for a great world. And the writer and director, they did a phenomenal job with it. Something I've never seen almost such a tight knit movie where everything played into everything, but also play devil's advocate. Sometimes I think it can be overdone. Sometimes when everything has to mean something and every connection comes back around, something feels contrived. It almost feels like the world is conspiring just to be about this one movie. Like, wait a minute, is there not a world outside of this movie? Which makes in and itself makes the movie feel too isolated in like one moment. But something about this movie just works. Even though it all connects back to itself, it doesn't feel contrived. I love it.
Yeah, it makes me on the extreme spectrum of a movie that feels too contrived. Makes me think of Death Note, all the plots that um,
Yeah.
Kira and Light Yagami would get into and their ways of I knew you would do this because like I've done this thing and you'd be at this exact location at this exact time. And they're making calculations that no person could ever possibly make in order to predict this very specific event. But this movie, it didn't feel like that. Every connection, it made sense. Every event flowed from previous events, and we were all tracking with it.
I'm happy. When I first saw the necklace, I thought it was gonna be some big sex cult thing, like human trafficking sex cult, all connected to this necklace. I'm happy it all ended up revert, and I think this makes the violence begot more violence even stronger theme. It all revolved around just two humans, a husband and wife that lost their son tragically to cancer and decided to wage a war against God. And I think since they made it just a good solid through line of just these two characters and a and how their actions absolutely upheaved a whole town, I think made it more concise than if it was like a whole elaborate, like, group thing.
And Holly, the grandma, so interesting. Even at the end, she didn't play her character as being particularly crazy, right? She wasn't giggling and nervously looking about. She plays it very straight, almost as if she were dealing with a burglar, just a home invader. I thought that was a very interesting acting choice.
You never got a shred of remorse from her.
Yeah.
You could tell her heart was hardened, and this was the path she was going down, and never once did she have any remorse, and I think it worked for her character well.
It's like, I have made these decisions with a sound mind. It's not like the devil told me to do it. There weren't voices in my head. This is a conscious decision that I'm committed to.
It makes it even her more hateable. And then it's an interesting question of like all of their violence was stemmed from the grief of the death of their son, but in their mind, this cycle of violence was started, in their opinion, from the violence of God because they were religious, Mormon, Christian, whatever, and their child died, and I assume they were like, this is an act of violence from God taking our child. So it's interesting that like more they're acting out of grief, but they probably saw it as as violence themselves. It's a lot. There's more that I could talk about, but I think I covered my main things. But I wanted to ask you, you enjoyed this movie as well. Is there anything I looked over that you really wanted to dive into?
This story, as much as it was about finding these two girls that had been abducted, is also about the moral descent of Heller Dover. Again, he is victimized as a parent because his children have been victimized, and he is looking for vengeance. He is self sufficient, highly competent, and he has a lust for vengeance. And those qualities would be a virtue in your typical action hero. Think John Wick, think Liam Neeson and Taken. These people are relentless and in their pursuit of their goals. But here, these same quote unquote virtues are shown to be damaging and self destructive and destructive to those that he loves, the people around him. It's his undoing. And at the end, we find him in that pit, and the earth is frozen over. And it makes me think of Dante's Inferno, or the innermost circle of hell, where Satan is. It's frozen. It's not fiery. It's not molten lava. It's ice. And what is the sin that got Satan into the innermost circle of hell? It's betrayal. What Keller Dover did, he did not betray a friend, but he certainly did wrong to an innocent man. And he was persistent, and he was dogged in his refusal to accept contrary evidence. He, as we've been saying this whole episode, brutalized an innocent disabled man for the duration of the film. And where has he found himself? Frozen in a pit. But there is still a glimmer of hope for him. He is not irredeemable. Forgiveness perhaps can be had. Justice will also, for sure, be had in prison. But we hear him blowing the whistle. And Jake Gyllenhaal's character notices. And then we cut to black.
I love what you said. I didn't even think about this, but the subversion of expectations that we often forget when we watch these war movies, these superhero movies, that these are just people fighting for good things. And we never bring up the fact that there's murder and that there's this violence and that there's this vengeance and that there's this anger behind these people because it's all for good. But I love that this movie turns it on its head. And it's is anger or vengeance. I don't know. I'm not going to say if it's good or wrong or right at any point, but it does show like, hey, it does not always lead to good things just because you're doing something in the name of justice. And so I think those are some great comparison, like those movies that you mentioned, compared to this movie.
So Jake Gyllenhaal's Detective Loki is a man who is after justice. And then Keller Dover is a man who is after vengeance.
And something talking about that reminded me of just a little thing I want to talk about was, like Jeffrey said, this is not a Christian movie by any means, or even a religious movie, but the religious undertones are very strong. And I found this really interesting. So the writer, I'm going to butcher the last name, Aaron Gruzowski, Gruzowski. So he wrote this script, and he was raised Catholic. He no longer practices it, but he says like it greatly impacts his writing. I really enjoyed this, and this reminded me of a more recent story, Ryan Johnson, who just released his third Knives Out movie. Not a religious movie, but it heavily depicts Christianity and Catholicism. But what I loved about the movie was it pointed out some of the issues with the structure, but it did not mock it. You know, there's what, like 1 point something billion people out there who are like some version of like Christian or just some like religious group. We don't have to mock things for them to be prevalent in media. We can say, hey, look at all these great things that these people experience every day in their life. And I think it's cool that both Ryan Johnson and Aaron Gruzowski did that. They maybe pointed out some of the holes in it, but they also showed this is impacting these people so strongly. And to some degree, we respect that as these writers. And so just a little thing that I realized with that the A Dead Man Walks or A Dead Man Wakes or whatever the most recent Knives Out movie was.
I talked about how Keller Dover prays the Lord's Prayer several times. What is he doing when he prays the Lord's Prayer? When he prays the Lord's Prayer, he is asking and trusting that God will provide for his needs. But that runs directly contrary to his own desire to be in control and to be the provider and to be self sufficient. And that's viewed as a problem. And then what else is he doing when he prays? He is praying that he will be forgiven in the same measure that he forgives. But that runs against his own nature, which is very ungracious, and he does not want to forgive. And so we're pitting Keller Dover's ideals and values against the religious values that in this context seem to be higher. They're presented as the right convictions that he is warring against.
Yeah, I feel like in often movies it will be shown that oh the this religious text or this religion says this, but then you find out well really morally to get the answer we need and want we have to do the opposite. So it's the opposite, putting human desire over this religious thing. But I thought it was cool how they stuck to like some idea of like no this religious idea is the correct way to go, and you are, in fact, part of the problem by going against it.
And he feels convicted by his religious beliefs. Again, when he is trying to pray the prayer and he can't finish it this time because he knows that he has not forgiven, and so perhaps does not deserve forgiveness. And here it's less about forgiveness and more about holding on to anger and hatred.
What anger will do to like a human's heart, which again, I love that it's not preaching to me, but it is very, very much a true theme and sentiment in human life. These themes of grief and violence and anger and bitterness. Yeah, just beautifully, masterfully woven. But with a beautiful movie, what would you say your most loving moment of it was? If not loving, but maybe holy moment. Jeffrey, what is your holy moment
Hmm.
of Prisoners?
Holy moment. I think that my holy moment was Keller Dover's character arc. Performance wise, Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman are pretty equal. There are moments where Hugh Jackman exceeds Jake Gyllenhaal and moments where Jake Gyllenhaal really shines above and beyond Hugh Jackman. But as a character, this man's stubborn refusal to accept the facts that are being presented to him because he wants to hold on to a sense of control, because he wants to um, believe that he can solve this by himself. That was very compelling. And how his character arc ended was exactly how it needed to end. So that is my holy moment.
It's a good one. I loved his character. I mean, it's kind of similar to me because I almost put like the characters, but it's one of those rare movies. I think it's one of the highest holy moments I can give. Is just the directing of the whole movie. You know, the acting, the cinematography, the writing, it was all great. But at the end of the day, the director is at the helm for a reason. The director is one to take all of these moving wide pieces that are sometimes so far in your peripheral. Like, how in the world are you even thinking about that? How are you thinking about that? Like the emotion of this one character that affects the emotion of this character that we're filming 20 days difference. So the ability to bring it all together in such a tight script where everything impacts everything, I think was beautiful in a way I've never really seen done or very rarely. So for that, my holy moment really is Denis Villeneuve's directing. Just 10 out of 10. The bit I've seen of him as a director, I already knew I loved. This really compels me to go watch all the Dune movies. I haven't seen any of them, I haven't read the books, I know nothing about them, but this really compels me to watch all of Denis' film catalog. Oh man, that was man, I really this has been one of my most enjoyable episodes we've done in a while. I love when I love a movie. Um,
Me
great stuff.
too.
But
This has been like, there's a lot of meat to it.
exactly, yeah, there's so much meat. Ugh, love meat. But that being said, what rating would you give this?
Yeah. On Very quickly on the topic of meat, we've covered meaty movies before, and perhaps like Gueros, the movie that we reviewed last week, had meat to it. But it really does make a difference, as you said, when we enjoy the type of meat. Right? If I'm not a big fan of pork and there's a lot of pork on my plate, it'll be more difficult for me to take it all in and digest it. But if I'm a big fan of beef and you give me a lot of beef, this is a beefy movie.
You know, I actually have something to say about that because I completely agree with you. People find and relate. People find truth in different types of movies. They relate to different types of movies. They enjoy different types of movies. But I think ultimately a lot of it boils down to the types of stories and humans being conveyed in those movies. Our dear friend Vega, and we have another friend Haley, they like these movies that convey human emotion and the most, in their opinion, the most authentic way. It's almost boring, like biographical films. They want it to feel as real and as emotional as possible, which that's not wrong, but that's to them their favorite type of meat. This type of movie is my type of meat, where it's still the film magic. It still feels like a story, but they are taking characters that feel so real and then exploring such a crazy phenomenon of like your kid being abducted. I guess that's not a good phenomenon. It's not probably the right word to use. An atrocity, a horrible thing, but then they're exploring it in such a, in my opinion, a real human way. They're exploring grief, they're exploring violence, they're exploring all these human emotions in an interesting filmatic way. And so to me, that's my type of meat. So yeah, I just you talking about meat made me that was a thought I had earlier that I wanted to share.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I brought it up then.
Sorry, did you didn't rank this movie? What'd you give it? Did you give it
Yeah,
a
yeah.
number?
I didn't give it a ranking yet.
You
I'm
gave it
gonna
a
give
big pile
this
of meat.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it pork, and I happen to like pork a lot. So
I love my wife doesn't like anything but chicken and steak, and it's an atrocity. I love pork. I love all meat. I don't think I've met really meat that I haven't enjoyed.
I feel like there is a kind of subtle sweetness to pork that I really appreciate. Yeah, have you noticed that
Yeah, I would say so.
compared to chicken and steak?
I mean, depending on the cut of pork too, and the quality. But, besides that, sorry, I'm distracting us with
Can
meat.
I give it a meat
What,
instead of a number?
how about you give it both? How about you give it both?
All right, I give it pork, and I'm gonna give this a 3.9 or 3.8.
Wow, classic Jeffrey. Glaze the shit out of a movie, give it a 3.8? What the heck?
I know. I'm bad. I'm bad. I'm
Was it
naughty.
is it my ex I hated that. Hated that. Uh, now I just imagine Jeffrey in a gimp suit with a sword dildo going, "I'm naughty." Anyways, Saoirse Ronan, your man. Um, I'm curious, is it a 3.8 because, like, it's just not I've said this before plenty of times where a movie's amazing, but just at the end of the day, it's not my cup of tea, so I give it a little bit lower. Or like, why 3.8?
I don't know. I think that really did enjoy this movie. I enjoyed it a lot.
Don't let me bully you into giving a higher rating. I just
No,
need
no.
to know.
I think that I am just a little more conservative when I give out my stars. Um, is like a bit of a buffer, right? I'm gonna change my ranking. I'm gonna change it. I
Oh,
think
no.
it is a solid 4.
A
I'll
2.
give it a 4. 4 feels like the
Okay.
highest for me. I've never given something a 5. I don't think.
Really? You're
But
definitely
maybe
giving
I
4 point
gave
something.
4 point something. I
We should keep track of what we give scores to things. Okay, that's fair enough. I bullied you into point 0.4 higher or point 0.2. Um, and pork, what a that's too vague of a meat. Gotta be more specific.
okay, not pulled pork. Pulled pork is fine, but it's not my thing.
No, that's not great.
Yeah. I like pork bulgogi.
Oh, that's nice. That's a fancy one. My
Yeah.
wife and I are going to Korean barbecue tomorrow night as a little fun fact, and we'll have pork bulgogi there.
Save me some.
No, I'm gonna eat all of it. But okay, anyways, besides the point, before I lose all of our audience, I'm gonna give this a 4.4. Absolutely was amazing. Everything that I want out of a movie. I think the only reason I'm not gonna give it a 5 is because like a 5 is just something that just speaks to me on a level I wasn't aware I needed in my life. You watch the movie and you didn't know how hard it was gonna hit you, and that wasn't this movie. This movie was perfectly constructed and I loved it, but it didn't touch something in me that I wasn't aware that wasn't there before, and I think film can do that. And as far as meats go, I have to give this like a marbled steak because there's so much to chew on, but there's also so much richness in it. So that's the meat I'm going to give it. Okay, you've listened to us banter for long enough, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Holy Won't Podcast talking about prisoners. Before we go, Jeffrey needs to spin the wheel, and I'm really hoping it's Finding Nemo. I loved Prisoners, but that was a heavy movie. Can we watch Finding Nemo next week and it be fun?
Watch it be Begonia or Phantom Thread. Honestly, I'm with you there. I want it to be either Double Indemnity, Phantom Thread, or Wild Card.
But was none of those are Finding Nemo.
Oh, Nemo. I meant Nemo as well. But
Okay.
okay, this is fun though. We're watching 2 noirs back to back, Double
Ah,
Indemnity. We're getting
heck
a
yeah.
new noir and we're getting an old noir, a classic noir. Now, Double Indemnity is a fun movie, I think. So I think that this is the better option over Phantom Thread or Begonia if we're not wanting something quite as heavy. It still deals with heavy themes. It's a film noir, but it's enjoyable.
I'm excited. This podcast has made me enjoy older classic black and white movies a lot more. So I agree with you. I think this will be a fun reprieve from those other two movies. But awesome.
The main character of this one is the main antagonist of the apartment, the
Oh,
CEO.
Lemon. Oh
No,
no, the
it's
antagonist,
the
not Jake Lemon.
antagonist. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm excited. I love the apartment, so I'm sure he'll do a great job. Thanks, guys, so much for joining today. This was an awesome episode. I really enjoyed talking about this movie. Definitely one of my new favorite movies of all time. If you haven't watched it, this podcast hasn't convinced you to watch it, then don't listen to us anymore. I'm just kidding. We love you. We hope you guys have a great evening. Remember, if your child is abducted, maybe don't harass the detectives that are trying to find her. But also, I don't have kids, so maybe that's bad advice. Maybe go out and find Paul Dano and beat him up. Until next time, get some rest, eat some Korean barbecue, and we will see you next week while we discuss Double Indemnity. Bye bye.